You have always been very good about having that healthy mindset. With me, I just recently started learning about this mindset, or teaching myself how to have that kind of mindset.
It's giving the people the benefit of the doubt.
Right. And so with me, again, I've mentioned this in the last podcast. The book that I'm reading is The Happiness Hypothesis. And the whole time he's using this correlation of like you and your thoughts, which we get in our brain when we see actions and reactions and are observing things. We go, why? I can't believe he didn't say this. I can't believe she didn't do that. I can't believe they did this. That was on purpose. Woe me, right? And in the book, he kind of creates this like analogy of your thoughts and you are two different components. Your thoughts are not you, because we've all had those thoughts early in the morning that are positive or negative, or late in the afternoon, positive or negative. Like you've been driving down a long road with a cliff to the side, and there's a thought of like, now that you're suicidal, but you're like, what if I just swerved?
Yeah.
Not intentionally, but like swerved. I could do that, and then we'd all be dead, kind of thing. That's not you wishing that on anybody, but that idea processed through your head, and that's not you. That's just an idea that your brain is firing the synapses. So this book has helped me get to where you're at, where you're going. Has he ever meant anything negative towards me? Has he ever tried to be intentionally rude, right? Like, has he tried? So this is helping me understand that when my brain is receiving information of intentional or unintentional, verbals or nonverbals, and it's analyzing it. Maybe it's something you didn't do, not something you did, but something you didn't think of. And I was like, well, she didn't think of this. Means a lot to me, and she should have known that means a lot to me, and she didn't do it. I started seeing this disconnect of me and my ideas. And in the book, the analogy is a rider riding an elephant, because an elephant doesn't have reins, right? It can't just move it to the side, by pulling on the reins. It can't just hit it on the side and it'll gallop. Like an elephant has its own ideas, and you have your own ideas. So you have to almost like tame this elephant. So there are riders who are riding these elephants, and they're doing, but it's through a process of taming. And there's a lot of tools that it gives you in this book of how to tame it. But long story short is, I'm just now learning that in the early stages of information getting into my brain where I feel hurt or upset about something you did or did not do, I stop myself and go, everybody's wired differently. She's processing information differently. You're processing information differently. She doesn't mean to be any malice. She doesn't have any malice and malicious intentions. She's not trying to be rude. She's not trying to be selfish. She's not trying to hurt you. You're just misinterpreting it. Just let this one slide. And if I catch that in the early stages of it and not suppress it, I'm getting better at it.
And then you feel like, do you feel like it gets easier to do?
Yes.
Because what do you think the difference is? Like, for me, I've always kind of been that way, where I don't hold a grudge. It's really easy for me to forgive people, and that could be a negative thing too, because people can walk all over me, right? And I think it comes from my people pleasing side, where I go, you know what? They didn't mean that, which is a good thing, but also it could be a negative thing.
Yeah. But I think you're keeping one. I mean, I'll let you finish your thought, but I think you're keeping one. I think you're being pessimistic by going, this is a good attribute of being gracious towards people, but it could be a bad thing. I think it's a very pessimistic perspective.
Well, I just mean like I've learned to also hold my ground, because I feel like always now obviously I like that has always been part of my personality, but I almost felt like for a while, because I was always saying yes, and it's like, well, that person's right, I was wrong. It's almost like I didn't have a voice myself, and I didn't even know what I wanted or what I was or what my voice was. It's like, do I even have my own opinions, or do I always agree with other people? So I think that's where it could be kind of a negative thing, because that's something I've been learning, I think, in the last like 3 years maybe, is well, I want my own voice. I don't want to always just agree with other people. I want to have my own opinions, of things. So that's what I mean by like, it could kind of go both ways. But in general, when you're having a conversation with somebody or you're arguing, it is good to have that kind of mindset. But my question was, to go back to my question, so obviously there's different people. It took you a little bit longer to get there. Do you think that's just personality?
Of why it took me longer?
Yeah.
I think I just wasn't given the information. Like, I think you.
But I wasn't either. I think that was.
Right. But I think that the same way as a female is wired differently than a male, meaning like a male has certain priorities and a female has different priorities, equal but different. I think the same way as when you see, oh, that person's easygoing or that person's hard-headed, that's another nature, nurture, upbringing that the wiring in the brain happens.
Right.
So here's an example. My dad was very short-tempered. Then my brother inherited that gene, and through that nurture, it was exposed to that short-temperedness, right? I was not short-tempered. I was not really short-tempered when you and I were married, but I had different attributes of short-temperedness with our boys, where I would shout very loudly, aggressively, like, boys, to catch their attention, and they kind of get startled. And that is a portion of that. So it's the wiring of your brain through your upbringing that kind of creates that way. So I don't think everybody is born short-tempered. I don't think everybody is born being gracious. I think
you can't blame it all on just personality.
Through your nurturing of your upbringing, you're like, well, my dad never really yelled. My mom never really yelled. And so therefore you have a higher tendency to be patient. And people that are patient have a higher tendency to be listening and understanding more. So when somebody was raised in a lot more chaos, shouting, yelling, short-tempered, short fuse, they have a higher tendency to be, quick to response and not process that information. So, and I'm seeing my uncles. My uncles are the same exact way. Very short-tempered, very quick to shout, very quick to yell. And I was actually thinking about this the other day. I was like, because of this book that I'm reading in the last
Makes
year,
you kind of process
of the last year of like, studying more and more, reading more and more literature about the brain and how the brain works and what it does and how the circuitry can be just jacked up through your upbringing. I think out of that genetic lining, I might, not to like, fluff me up or anything, I feel like this is just now where the buck is starting to stop. Right? So it's like, I'm not saying the buck stopped. I'm just saying like through my process of growth, I was like the buck is slowly stopping this short-tempered cycle of genetic, line of
I think
people.
you stopped the cycle for sure.
Well, I mean, I could also screw it up. Like, I mean, there's...
But you're aware of
correct.
it, and it's like something you're working on every day. And so I don't think we could always mess the cycle up.
Correct.
But the fact that you're aware that there was this like pattern and you're trying to break it.
Yes.
Is like a great thing.
Right. So like my entire upbringing, any of my uncles and my grandparents and my great grandparents have never uttered the words of "I'm sorry" to their kids. Till this day, they haven't. So
did your parents tell you
no,
they loved
never.
you?
No. My mom, yeah. My mom did. My mom still calls me and says, "Love you." My dad, no. So to be able to tell my kids I'm sorry for what I did, like, pushing discipline too far or being too harsh with them,
or just being wrong,
to show them and saying, hey, I was wrong, I'm sorry. That is the first time in the cycle of behavior in our lineage that has ever happened in my extended family.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And intermediate family. So yeah, it's a growing thing. So when you say like nobody had to teach you, but because your nurturing didn't have to call for you to join. There's a reason why my brother is not having kids, is because he's like, he said that he's like, I'm not having kids because, and you know, he's close to 40 now. He's like, I'm not having kids because I saw how much stress was put on our parents, and that's rightfully so. But that's a person who's saying like, I'm just gonna avoid growth, and maybe he's not looking at it as growth, because I didn't look at it as growth before having kids. It just, growth is something that I started understanding through it. But yeah, I had to be taught, and I had to be given resources to help understand the brain and how to do it, you know?
Hey, thanks for watching our Next Door Neighbors podcast.
And be sure to capture the full episode anywhere podcasts are streamed, and including our YouTube channel, Next Door Neighbors.